Good afternoon from the Nest Centre in London, and thank you for joining this week's midweek briefing. My name is John Lough. I'm the head of foreign policy. We've timed this briefing, might I say it, rather well, because we had Steve Witkoff yesterday in Moscow. He met with President Putin for 3 hours, and we understand from Putin's aide, Yuri Ushakov, that the two sides held, in Ushakov's words, a useful and constructive meeting. President Trump immediately took to Truth Social to claim that great progress had been made and held out the prospect of meeting with Putin as early as next week. And he also spoke of the possibility of a trilateral meeting, that is with both Putin and President Zelensky. And this morning, the Kremlin confirmed that agreement had indeed been reached with the United States on a presidential meeting. And that it would take place in the coming days at an unspecified location, which apparently has been agreed, but just not yet announced. And apparently the Russian side proposed the meeting, which in itself is interesting, since Putin had previously said that a meeting at this level would need to be prepared carefully, implying that there was actually no particular hurry to meet. Of course, it's not the first time that there's been a wave of optimism after a Witkoff visit to Moscow and renewed speculation that Putin wants to bring the war to an end quickly. But Trump appears to have learned from experience and is trying to keep up the pressure on Moscow. Immediately after the Witkoff visit, he imposed an additional 25% tariff on goods from India entering the United States. This saying that this decision was justified by India's continued purchase of Russian oil. And interestingly, the executive order introducing this measure says that, and I quote, "The actions and policies of the government of the Russian Federation continue to pose an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States." So there we have it. But there are clearly a lot of moving pieces here, and to discuss them, we're delighted to have two great experts. Abbas Gallyamov is a former speechwriter for Putin when Putin was prime minister. Abbas is a Bashkir, and he worked for many years in the office of the president of Bashkortostan before entering politics. He left Russia in early 2022. And he has the honor of a criminal conviction for discrediting the Russian army. And our second expert is Tom Graham, a well-known Western voice on Russian affairs. He was special assistant to the president and senior director for Russia on the National Security Council, staff from 2004 to 2007. He's a distinguished fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and co-founder of Yale University's Russia, Eastern European and Eurasian Studies program. He's also the author of a monograph entitled Getting Russia Right that was published in 2023. Before we go any further, can I just remind our viewers that if you have a question or a comment, please put it in the chat and I will do my best to get to it. So Abbas, I'd like to start with you. Trump has spoken to Putin at least 6 times by phone since he came back to the presidency. Steve Witkoff has met Putin 5 times. And I think we can say this is intensive diplomacy, but so far, there's really been very little to show for it beyond some prisoner exchanges. But now we have the presidential meeting. So I just wonder from your perspective, why has Putin so far not chosen to play Trump's game? I mean, Trump offered him some months ago a way out of this war, and it seemed to be a really quite generous deal, and also the possibility to improve and dramatically improve US relations with Russia. So has something changed? What do you think?
Well, the fact that, thank you for inviting, for ability to speak. So definitely after we heard that Putin agreed to meet Trump, we can definitely tell that he is ready to move at least halfway in the direction in which Trump wants him to move. That is, I'm sure there would be never a meeting if there had been no basic agreement between the sides that it's possible to find some common ground. So the summit shouldn't end in nothing. And there should be some result. So now we can speak that Putin agreed. Before this, he didn't agree because it was like possible not to agree. You see, this is just the only reason. If Trump had been pressing harder back in January, I think Putin would have moved faster, much faster at that moment. But you see, they got bogged in negotiations about the economic issues, business issues, about which Kirill Dmitriev was talking to Witkoff. And Putin got that feeling that it's possible to just to buy Trump, to corrupt Trump. I don't mean corruption. In this case, I don't mean corruption as something like a real corruption, like a criminal case. No, like maybe Trump doesn't want anything for himself personally. I don't know. But they offered American businesses a lot of promising multi-billion projects. Like, a lot of people in Kremlin and the government, they were preparing documents. So it's common knowledge there that at least three oil refineries, which belong parts of which belong to Rosneft, were proposed to Chevron. That ability to sell Russian gas to Europe, also Chevron, they're telling, like would be buying it in St. Petersburg or on the St. Petersburg exchange, and thus Russian gas would become American gas, and it would be sold in Europe, and all the difference between Russian domestic price and the price in Europe would be already American Chevrons. And the project which belongs to Rosneft, which is called Vostok Oil, it's oil extraction in the north of Russia, also like offered to Chevron and just a second, let me recall the second name.
Yeah, don't worry. I mean, I think you're making a good point that Russia was offering generous commercial terms.
So those things were like the major point of discussion for at least 2 months in March, April, and so like Putin had the feeling that like we bought Trump. It's possible to give to him something like in different directions, in business, in Iran, with regard to Israel, and maybe China, maybe later in Venezuela. Between themselves they were discussing, yes, Venezuela, okay. So thus, like, he would leave Ukraine for us. He doesn't care much for Ukraine. Trump was giving, very frequently criticizing Zelensky, once kicking him out of the White House. Like, Russia was exalted, Kremlin was happy, and Putin got the feeling that it was possible to bargain. That's why he was not in a hurry. Now, when Trump started pressing, they got a kind of disappointment. Until the last moment, they were still hoping that, okay, we would ignore Trump. We wouldn't argue with him. They really don't want to make him their enemy like Biden was. So they don't want to spoil personal relations, but they were still hoping that we would be we'll continue pressing. We wouldn't yield much. And the harms he is promising to us so far, these sanctions, okay, we can bear them. They are not pleasant. They are problematic. In the long run, it's a big problem. But like so far we can really win. Like Putin, they all believe that like within 1 or 2 months the Ukrainian front would collapse, and then we would come back to Trump. He wouldn't be our enemy with whom it would be impossible to talk. Like we'll change reality on the ground and we would come back to talking to Trump. That's their perception. And now all of a sudden they have to meet. I think Trump really started pressing harder, and they feel that time came when you have to meet him halfway.
So they've kind of reached their limit. Yeah, well, that's very interesting. Tom, I mean, if I can turn to you, please. The peace agreement that Putin is seeking, it seems to me, isn't just about Ukraine. He wants to settle the Ukraine question. And these processes, of course, are very strongly interconnected. But Putin's looking at something much bigger. And for that, to realize that bigger vision, he has to somehow influence the Europeans. And of course, Trump can be an instrument in that process, but it's something that's likely to take a very long time. So is Putin really going to be forced down this road effectively of some sort of ceasefire in Ukraine, which he's resisted all along? Do you think something's changed in this respect?
Well, I think the short answer to that is no. We don't know what the substance of the discussion was in Moscow yesterday, what was actually put on the table, and what has fueled this talk about evidently an agreement for the two presidents to meet in the nearest future. Now, interestingly enough, I think each side has claimed that it's the other side that proposed the presidential meeting. The White House certainly says that the proposal came from the Russian side. Ushakov, I think earlier today, denied that the Russians had made that offer. We will have to see. But you're absolutely right. From the very beginning, from the Kremlin standpoint, the Russia-Ukraine war was part of a larger concern that Russia had about European security, broadly construed, and that there's no sort of simple answer to the Ukraine issue absent some broader discussion of how you're going to arrange European security going forward. Central to this is the role of NATO in European security. Putin is not opposed simply to Ukraine joining NATO. He is opposed to further NATO expansion eastward. He would like to see NATO play a lesser role in European security going forward. And as you've noted, these are not issues that you can resolve at a summit meeting between the President of the United States and the Russian Federation. This will require some input by the Europeans, a substantial amount of input by the Europeans. It's going to be a long and hard set of negotiations spread out over, I would think, an extended period. So the most you could hope for, I would imagine, out of a presidential meeting in the near future, is some agreement on the broad outlines of how you are going to proceed. I don't think it leads to a ceasefire in the near term because Putin needs certain sort of facts on the ground to be acknowledged before he's prepared to move towards a ceasefire. So while I think that this is a positive step in the sense that it does open up the possibility for genuine negotiations over Ukraine, over issues of European security, I would hesitate to exaggerate what the outcome of any meeting between the two presidents would be in the near future.
I mean, I note that when Putin gave his little press conference a few days ago, seated alongside Lukashenko, without naming Trump, he referred to disappointment on the US side being related to exaggerated expectations. And it would seem to me now there are going to be enormous expectations around this meeting between Trump and Putin. And whatever the outcome, it's going to fall short of those. So,
look, I mean, that's absolutely true. It has to fall short of what the expectations are at this point. I think there is a broad desire in Ukraine, in the West, I think, even in Russia to end this conflict. But the terms on which it ended are critical to Ukraine, are critical to Russia, and the United States and our European allies should have some interest as well. It's just not any old agreement that will work. So laying the foundation for a durable peace going forward is critical, and that's not a matter of a conversation between two presidents. That is a matter for a much more extended negotiation. You can start that negotiation at a presidential meeting, but the resolution is far into the future.
Abbas, back to you. I remember, I don't know if this is true, but I remember people saying that Putin supposedly admired George W. Bush's power. He, at the same time, admired Obama's mind, but not his power, and it was implying that he didn't admire George W. Bush's mind. But in the case of Donald Trump, do you think that he in any way fears Trump's power, his impulsiveness, his unpredictability? I mean, it must be, very puzzling for him to be working with a leader of this kind, because Trump is so unique. But how do you think Moscow reads Trump at the moment?
It's a very complicated, multifaceted feeling. Number one, well, they view Trump as at least like promising president, because he came after Biden, who was horrible. And since Trump came as opposition to Biden, well, you cannot treat Trump bad. So he is at least promising in the eyes of Putin, in the eyes of Kremlin, and it would be really stupid to fall out with Trump, just like we did with Biden. There are a few exceptions, like Russian hawks, Sechin, Patrushev, Gromov, people like this. They don't really care who the president is. Like, it's America, and they're our enemy. So we shouldn't lay much emphasis onto the personality. So don't have too high expectations because it's just a different person. No, there would be like no difference ultimately. So do not fly high, not to fall down painfully. But they are in the minority. The majority of the Russian political elites and Putin himself, they do have hope that with Trump it's possible. Like, he is pragmatic. So he is not like this stupid idealist like Obama or Biden, who are speaking like, you know how they perceive Obama and Biden and Harris, people like this who are talking too much about human rights and all these humanitarian factors. Like, they first wanted to deceive us, and there was so much trying to convince us that these things matter that they started believing in these things by themselves. So it's a kind of stupid. They stopped being pragmatic. It's impossible to talk to them. Like, Trump is not like this. He's very pragmatic. It's possible to talk to them like in terms of realpolitik. You know, there is a very important thing I would try to, it's very, like, you know, delicate. I would try to explain, you know, like, for Putin, Trump is very comprehensible and it's very respectable. Like, he doesn't care for democracy. He's trying to dismantle this democracy there in America. He is trying to gain power. This is exactly what Putin was doing for 25 years. So, like, in the eyes of Putin, like, normal rulers should behave like this. And the fact that Trump is like this, just look how he's ruling. He doesn't care for court decisions. He doesn't care for this mass media. And being criticized by opposition, he is not like telling like, I'm sorry guys, like others were doing. No, he's going forward, he's pressing, he's aggressive. Like this is like real politician. Putin respects his personal style. And this is very important. And I think that this is exactly what Trump understands and what he wants. That's why he's trying to combine this flattery with pressure. He's trying to create the situation when for Putin to deceive Trump's expectations would become like more problematic than deceiving the expectations of his entourage. You know, so you know this reference group or reference person. Like Trump wants to become this reference person for Putin. So far, it's Rothenberg, Kovalchuk, Patrushev, Sechin, all this taken together. They are the people with whom Putin is like discussing things internally when he is planning to make some decision, and he is thinking in terms of how would guys look at the decision? Is it strong enough? So he means these people. Trump wants at certain point to be instead of this, to appear instead of these people, so that like it doesn't matter what Rothenberg say. It matters what Trump would think, you know, because he's like really like me. He's I don't understand. Sorry, I don't. I'm not sure that I'm making myself clear. But it's a very important point. I think this is what explains Trump's strategy. Actually, sorry that I shifted a little bit to the side. You didn't ask me about Trump's strategy.
Don't worry. I think you made, Abbas, you made an important point there. We've got a question that's come in that you may be able to just answer this very briefly from Laura Brady, who asks, are there any suggestions of European participation in a trilateral meeting? Now, I mean, first of all, this presupposes that there will be a trilateral meeting with Zelensky, and I'm actually very skeptical about that. But Abbas, very briefly, what do you think are the chances of Putin, Zelensky, and Trump meeting?
No, very little chance. I can't imagine Putin meeting with Zelensky. You know, the whole Putin's construction, like which he was building, would collapse. Like meeting with Trump is meeting with somebody equal. Zelensky cannot be equal to Putin. He is subordinate. Ukraine should be subordinate to Russia. Like, so he would be trying to avoid it at any cost. And I think Trump would not press. This is just a trading point for Trump. That's my opinion.
Sure. No, I would support that view. Tom, if I could turn to you, there's a question here from James Scher, and I'll just read the question to you. James asks, does Putin view his endlessly reiterated terms on Ukraine as a precondition for achieving wider aims in Europe, or as conditions to be traded for wider concessions by the West?
That's a good question, obviously. I mean, Putin has not budged from his maximal positions on Ukraine up to this point. You know, I do think there is some wiggle room on those, depending on what the West, and particularly the United States, has to put on offer. That's why the question of what Steve Witkoff brought to Moscow yesterday is so important, and why that has accelerated movement towards a presidential meeting. But I do think that Putin thinks in terms of the broader strategic arrangements inside Europe. He has his ideas about how this should be structured. I do believe that he understands that there will have to be some compromise at the end of the day. But to have a compromise, you have to engage. And what he was looking for in an American president, and Trump answered that, is a president who's prepared to engage on the full range of issues that are of concern to Russia at this point. Now, where this will come out at the end of the day depends on how the United States conducts its foreign policy, how closely we're aligned with our European allies and with Ukraine, whether the United States can develop a vision a compelling vision of what European security should look like going forward, and whether it can find the right combination of pressure on Russia and dialogue that produces the types of concessions that will be needed on both sides to find a more stable European security. The real challenge in the years ahead will be stabilizing this long frontier between Russia and the West. It now runs from the Barents Sea all the way down to the Black Sea. In some ways, the conflict in Ukraine is really about where that line is going to be drawn through Ukraine. How close it will be to the Russian border, how close it will be to Ukraine's border with the rest of Europe. But once that is determined, the strategic challenge will be stabilizing that line and then diffusing tension along that line.
So, I mean, in terms of the apparatus for supporting this policy planning process and the negotiations that are going to take place, what is currently intact in the United States? One has the impression that a lot of things have been dismantled. In the State Department, National Security Council, it's not clear if there is any real Russia expertise close to Trump. Are you confident that the United States has the capacity to shape the policy that needs to be developed to at least protect US and hopefully European interests here?
Well, look, I mean, there are the big questions about that, in part because of what this looks like from the outside and the distrust of the so-called deep state, the traditional national security apparatus inside the U.S. government. There doesn't appear to be a regular interagency process that fleshes out ideas and presents options to the president. You know, all that said, I mean, there is, to my knowledge, at least a small working group that includes some people who have expertise on Russia, Ukraine, that is working through various options to present to the president. Now, how those are presented to President Trump, how he reacts to that is something I don't know the answer to. But the idea that all of this is being done on the fly, I think, is a misreading of what's actually going on inside the administration.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to come back to Abbas. We have a question from Boyan Pachevsky, who asks, could you elaborate on the new role of Sergei Chemezov, the head of Rostec, and his influence on the potential willingness of Putin to compromise? You any thoughts on the role of Chemezov?
Well, yes, I don't know about the new role. I would speak about his traditional role. He is one of those who is expected to be hawk, but who actually is not a hawk. His biography, his background, they're hawkish, but he is quite pragmatic, too pragmatic to be a hawk. So till the last moment, you know, whenever the split between the hawks and technocrats, let's call them, because they are not doves in classical sense of the word, they're more technocratic. So when the original split between the hawks and the technocrats with regard to the issue of the war arose, it was probably something end of summer, beginning of the fall of 2022, when it became like finally like absolutely clear that the plan of quick victory blitzkrieg failed. So the split appeared, and Chemezov was mostly on the side of the technocrats. Sometimes for some like domestic reasons, sometimes probably because he is responsible for functioning of real economy. It's not like propaganda. It's a lot of everyday daily issues which he has to solve, and he sees how sanctions are slowly but surely working. So he cannot afford being very ideological. He has to be pragmatic. Maybe for this reason, but he was like, whenever there was agreement or disagreement, or some argument between them with regard to each new issue, whether we should escalate or we should try to de-escalate, he was mostly on the side of the fence of technocrats who wanted de-escalation. Like this, he was probably till March or April this year, when the hawks became so powerful, like they really felt that the problem of Trump solved. Trump is not going to press anymore, so we should start really like pressing hard. We should really continue with Ukraine. We should prepare attack against Estonia. They were speaking mostly about Narva or maybe Moldova. So opening the second front and like mobilizing economy, making like this traditional Russian attitude of the not special military operation. No, it's all-out war. Like patriotic, the next patriotic war, like total 100% mobilization. Cannons instead of butter, and so and it became like so powerful. They became so influential that Chemezov and Manturov, who is like the right hand of Chemezov, they started shifting in the direction of Sechin and Patrushev. And that was a serious reason of concern for Kovalchuki, who are the leaders of the opposite camp of these technocrats. Like this, it was till the last moment, but maybe now with Putin having to move towards Trump and possibility of changing the direction coming, maybe not during the next meeting, as I told, but okay, in one meeting by September, October, maybe, he would move back. It's possible, I think. He is too pragmatic to stay on the other side. That's my view of Chemezov.
Sure. No, and obviously these negotiations, I mean, if some sort of settlement is within reachable distance, it's going to affect that internal balance that you're describing in the Russian system. Tom, I'm going to finish with you. We are sort of really running out of time, but I'd really be very interested in your view on this. If you could just be brief. Seems to me that Trump is navigating between two important constituencies domestically. You have the MAGA base that wants to put an end to these unnecessary entanglements abroad. And then there still seems to be a quite strong view in Congress that, first of all, Ukraine is important to US national security interests, that Russia poses a genuine threat, and that the NATO alliance remains essential for underpinning US security. So how does he navigate between these two? Is he going to be able to find an outcome that somehow keeps everybody happy?
Well, that's certainly what he's trying to do at this point, and you've seen him over the past several months navigating between those two factions within his coalition. Certainly, the rhetoric on NATO has changed over the past several months. We saw that at the summit. The rhetoric on Ukraine and on Russia has changed in the past 2 weeks. But the way I think he bridges the gaps between these two factions is to say that pressure on Russia is critical to producing the type of ceasefire and the end of the conflict that I seek and that the MAGA base wants at this point. Also remember that he's doing all of this without committing a tremendous amount of U.S. resources at this point. So if you're going to support weapons deliveries to Ukraine, it's going to be the NATO allies that are going to purchase that and send it on to Ukraine. No cost to the U.S. Taxpayer. So he's going to try, I think, in the weeks ahead to continue that same type of delicate balance. We need to apply pressure. That's what I'm hearing from from Republicans in the Congress. We need to move to a ceasefire. That is what I'm hearing from the MAGA base. These two, I need to work with the Congress to continue the pressure to produce the ceasefire that the MAGA people want. That's the way I think he thinks about it at this point.
Yeah, I mean, these things are not mutually exclusive, of course, if you can use the right instruments, but it's just seemed to many of us that he hasn't wanted to apply real pressure to Putin.
Well, I think there are certain doubts within in Trump's own mind as to how the pressure is to be applied and how much pressure the United States can actually apply. He doesn't seem to be a firm believer in sanctions, although he's used those from time to time. And you've heard him say that Russia always finds a way to circumvent the sanctions in any event. To my mind, the sanctions aren't the critical element here. The critical element is really providing Ukraine with the wherewithal that it needs to stay on the battlefield, to deny Russia the type of progress that it believes is necessary that Putin believes is necessary to achieving its goals over the long run. To the extent that you can slow down that progress, you create opening, I think, for a negotiated solution. The thing that we all need to bear in mind, and it's not necessarily good news from the standpoint of the Ukrainians, nor from the standpoint of European allies, is that Putin is well on his way to achieving most of the goals that he had set for the conflict with Ukraine. Ukraine is not going to join NATO in the near future. Ukraine is not going to drive Russia out of the territory that it seized over the past 3 years. There are going to be provisions that provide for a non-discrimination against Russian speakers. The real question here is the extent of Russia's or of Ukraine's military. I was told at the very beginning of this conflict that the real stumbling block between the United States and Russia will be the status of that part of Ukraine that's not controlled by Russia at the end of the fighting, whenever that occurs. Putin clearly wants Ukraine as a vassal state that enjoys a relationship that is roughly akin to what Belarus has at this point. The U.S. interest ought to be in the preservation of a sovereign, independent Ukraine on whatever territory Kiev controls at the end of the conflict. Those are two radically different concepts for Ukraine's future, and the real challenge is finding a way to bridge those two concepts so that you can come to a durable ceasefire and lay the basis for a broader discussion about European security.
Well, I would agree with all of that when it comes to this whole issue of demilitarization. That is the absolutely critical issue, and in that respect, I'm not confident that Putin is going to achieve his ultimate goal. But we're going to be in business for a long time, Tom and Abbas, talking about these things. So thank you both very much for joining us today. And I want to just tell our viewers that although we did intend to take an August break, I believe that we're going to be back next week. So we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you, Abbas and Tom, very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.